Right. Who's got a question? Brilliant. I've gone.
Quite a general question. What impact are you seeing on the academic side of universities impacting on the telephony needs? In other words, we talked a lot about the commercial aspects of telephony, but are you starting to see an impact on what, say, lecturers want, what the academic side want from a telephony or communications environment might want? It's more than just telephony these days.
That's a good question. Who'd like to go on that?
So I was talking to someone over the break about this, and one of the things we did when we started off was a lot of strategy setting and user focus groups and things like that. And one anecdote I like to tell is that we came across complete opposite ends of the spectrum from our existing academic community. We had one guy who was absolutely all over it. He said, you know, whatever you can give me, it's absolutely brilliant. And he went as far, he's one of these people who said, you know, I don't even want a phone on my desk, I don't want a soft client on my laptop, I've got my own iPhone, I pay for my own iPhone and I'll just run a client on that. At the other end of the spectrum, there was one guy who'd gone as far, and he was on an old analogue extension, he'd gone as far to go to Argos and buy an answering machine so he could screen his calls.
Did it take tape?
So he could listen to who it was on the phone before he chose to answer the call or not. So, you know, when you've got an academic community that's far apart, you know, you're almost never going to be able to satisfy them with one solution. But one thing we have found is that although a lot of the drivers behind deploying UC and SIP trunks and all that sort of thing have been finance-based and, you know, all telephone exchanges going end of life and things like that, we are seeing more and more demands, whether it be from international partnerships, more and more distributed working, and things like that, that we are seeing more and more things along these lines that are supporting it. And now it's a long way off, but we're talking about things like trialling, putting presence into our VLE, so that traditionally, you know, the academic had the concept of an office hour. Well, potentially, why don't we make that a virtual office hour by embedding the presence in the VLE? And, you know, I think the other thing is to drive adoption is to make it very much opt-in rather than on by default. But it's growing, but I think it's organic rather than big bang and it's there and it's accepted.
I think the thing that I can offer, we're halfway through rolling out Link as PBX replacement. It's being done as PBX replacement rather than for presence and everything else, or that's coming in on the back of it. And the one thing that we're concentrating a lot on is actually training the individual to use it and think about how they can potentially change the way they work because of this new technology. And we're taking it in bite-sized chunks. We're putting a phone out on the desk with the soft client. It's more about, it's a phone as a replacement for your phone, but there's these other features. But we're then saying, well, just think about stuff, and perhaps in the next stages of our project, then we'll say, well, could you link enable that process when you want to get that purchase order authorized? Do you need to send an email, or could we get it to send an IM and things like that? So there's opportunities around that. We haven't got to that stage yet. And we have rolled out our Link stuff to the staff first. And we've chosen to do the teaching staff, the academics, a bit later on. They'll be after Christmas. But yeah, so we're waiting to find out what they're going to come up with. But we can see lots of opportunity there for stuff. And yeah, I mean, you've got the academics that would still prefer a blackboard compared to a whiteboard. And yeah, it's precisely the same thing. Some are just not interested. Others are going to have and ask, when are the students getting a link as well? So yeah.
Okay. Another question.
Yeah. This is actually related to QoS, and it might ignite one. I've been in students for quite a long time now, over 20 years. And I remember the early days where that was debated with chaplains, where there was sort of working group sessions as to how to implement QoS. And then I think basically the answer came back, it's all too difficult, and that's where effectively the child's implement, you know, the child look back with that, if you see what I mean. If it was all too difficult then, all of a sudden the world's moved on since then. However, in some respects it's become a lot harder, because, for example, networking in QoS, that's great, but actually all of the software-defined networking, virtualization, and so on and so forth, where does it sit there? Because a lot of telephony services are now sitting
Absolutely, yeah. In short, yes, it has. It's more challenging from a technical point of view, and I think now the sort of the environment we live in, the business case also doesn't stack up for Quas anymore. Sort of gone are the days of being able to throw money at a problem to make it go away. So there's sort of two areas of impact there. Yeah, for us to turn Quas on, diff-serve, whatever we're going to put on the backbone, the administration to do that, to find out what the best way to do it would be, is difficult. We're not going to meet the needs of everybody by choosing a particular technology, whether that's MPLS or whatever. So again, when it's not going to be a uniform solution for everybody, and then when it comes to trying to deploy that on the network within all of the regions, and bringing the regions on board makes that slightly easier because they're under one management domain now. Very, very difficult technically, very difficult to do that, and expensive. It's not to say that it can't be done. In the commercial world, where you sell an MPLS service, so you put a premium on your IP service by selling things like MPLS, you know, I'll be honest here, this is the sort of BT model. It stacks up because the customer pays for it. You know, ultimately the customer pays for that. In the Janet environment, we don't think that would particularly fly. So we're trying to understand how we can do it, if and when.
And also, if you are implementing Quas and you're requiring it, at some point that means you're discarding something.
Yeah.
It's prioritisation.
Yeah.
And if you hit those levels, it's also hitting the relevant running equipment, because not everything can be done in hardware, so you get a huge degradation of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely, totally, utterly agree. The network Quas side of things is just one small element in a whole spectrum of other stuff that can affect the availability or quality of the service. It isn't going to fix all of the problems. In a way, us switching it on would purely be to meet the perceived needs of the supply market and the perceived needs of some customers. There isn't really a technical and business justification to do it.
I think, and it's times like this, it reminds me how long I've been knocking around, is that I was involved in the early Janet Quas trials as well, and there were two main areas that were the things that made it hard. One was the devolved management, in that the regions were managed by regional network operators. I can't remember what they were called at the time. It might be RPANs or RN, no, it was before RNOs, but anyway. And the other thing was then, well, okay, everyone's got a different perception about what percentage of their traffic needs to be premium. You know, for a college, that may be a completely different number to a medium-sized HE, that may be a completely different number to a large-sized HE. And obviously one of those issues has gone away now in the regional networks, and now all operated from a single NOC, and that makes that easier. But the other thing that came out of it was that it was agreed that Quas only really helps and kicks in when you're at about 90% utilisation of your link. Which means actually it's the smaller sites and the non-resilient sites, the colleges and smaller universities, that are most to be helped and affected by QoS. So one of the problems gone away, one of the problems still stays, but then you've got a further problem in that everyone's version of Quas is different, in that for some people it's turning on diff-serve and just inspecting DSCP markings. For others it's full-on MPLS VRFs that are either statically nailed up, so you've got like a private path between you and the telco, and others moving to more of the SDN type world. Is it a RSVP signal dynamic path that says I'm going to this data centre or that data centre, and this is how many calls I need going across it?
Yeah.
So it's still an amazingly complex melting pot. I still think there are benefits from it, and you know, in certain circumstances, but I also have to declare that. How many HEs did you say that were on your slide that had gone?
3.
Well, one of them's Lancaster, and we've deployed SIP trunking. It does just work. However, it's those failure type scenarios where it may kick in and help you. But as you say, the fact that your voice traffic is being protected means that something else has gone wrong and something's getting dropped.
Yeah.
And I think that's what everyone needs to recognise about implementing Quas.
Yeah, the easiest way to do it would just be to put a statement out on the web and say, Janet's turned Quas on. And not do anything, and then BT would work with us, and the customers would be happy, and nobody would probably notice any difference.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing
I'm
as well.
not allowed to do it.
Because, I mean, obviously, if Janet did turn Quas on magically, and that's only one of the factors in the whole chain of events has to happen. You know, you've got other networks involved that have to have quads involved as well. So Janet turning their bit of it on won't necessarily solve the whole problem. I think that you mentioned, Roger, in your talk that there's the size event. I think in either December or January. We've got the dates later on to talk about quads and other issues which Janet and other people are coming to.
Sorry, the cost as well is gets even worse because obviously, depending on how you do it, it's a two-way thing, and it's natural. You might solve it one way, but you might not necessarily return that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And making the whole environment, sort of tweaking the whole environment and turning things on to meet that customer and that supplier. You then have to then look at, well, how do we do that with other suppliers and other customers? Before you know it, you've got 15, 16 different quads techniques on an IP network, and you've ended up in a situation whereby, okay, some people's telephony traffic is premium, but the majority of the community's traffic now isn't. You know, by making something premium, you're making something rubbish, which is the way it works.
And I think that it's clear from conversations that have happened outside of this room and elsewhere that Janet and others all seem to be happy to engage now in a further conversation about quads and all sorts of other things, and looking at what needs to be done for the community and why they should do that. Someone just a quick point.
Yes, and I think from my point of view, so our link infrastructure is consumed across Janet, and it's an agreement that we've set up outside of the purchasing framework because it didn't exist at the time. But from my point of view, at the moment there isn't a problem to solve because the network is over-provisioned. And there are potential things whereby if there was a failure of one part of the network, just understanding that the link utilizations are not running over 50%, so that if traffic has to reroute, there's still going to be no congestion unless there's a really, really big failure, in which case you've just got to think about your own plan B. But is it worth spending a certain amount of our money actually trying to work out how you do quads, or is it worth just making sure that the investment is there to make sure that the network is over-provisioned so that we don't actually get these problems? That's been the strategy up until now, and it's working quite well. You could spend a lot of money actually trying to fix the quads issue, but then are you taking money from over-provisioning in the network?
We'd be taking it from other areas, There's only a certain amount of money to go around.
Okay, quick point at the front from Jeff.
I think that actually, what Roger said at the beginning, the most important thing here is to get other telcos on board, and if all they need is a statement on your website that you're doing quads, then that's actually what we want. The obstacle is not having them on board. But slightly second point, it is actually possible to configure quads wrong. We did this. If you thought that quads would only kick in when there's over subscription, but in fact you configured it wrong, so you made all your traffic gold, and gold is set up so if there's more than 10% gold, the rest goes thrown away. Actually, you get major packet loss when you're not oversubscribed.
When you're not oversubscribed,
isn't the whole of it. You actually do have to configure it right so that nothing's thrown away.
And it's a very strategic decision as well, and I think a lot of people turn it on. Cisco have a thing called they just turn it on because there's an auto quad statement on most Cisco switches. But you have to decide, so if you allocate 2 megabits of a 100 megabit link, thinking about a fast Ethernet port to gold or premium, what do you do if you exceed that? Now the Cisco mindset says, well, if you can't assure the quality of it, then you throw it away. Exactly. Or do you put it in premium? How do you signal to it? There's a whole load of decisions, and that was the other difficulty. And I can't remember who made the point that it's a bilateral agreement, is QoS, is that it's pointless Lancaster saying, well, I'm going to do the throw it away method, and then I have a conversation at an IP level through some collaboration or whatever like that with another organisation. Let's say Tomo, and Tomo has the thing where, well, I'm going to throw that out. I'm not going to throw that away. So Tomo will be merrily sending me premium marked packets. I'll be throwing them away. So unless everyone's got that mindset, which means you are literally herding cats along the community. It's not to say it's impossible, but it is difficult.
Okay, I'm slightly conscious that we have a room full of food, and there are only suppliers in that room at the moment, which is never a good combination. But just one quick question from somebody else, and hopefully something that Joanna can answer without setting you up.
All right, I'm quite happy to hide in here at the back.
Yes, sir.
When talking about providing converged
Yeah. Yeah, in the telephony world there's a thing called an Erlang to work this out, but because in the unified comms world you're including things like video, look at your, my recommendation would be look at your worst case highest quality video app as part of that unified communications suite, and then think, what if 40% of my users were online at the same time? You know, take a worst case scenario view. Or from a management point of view, you know, manage the number of users that can have video, and then you don't necessarily have to worry about an upgrade. You can manage it sort of from that perspective.
I think you'll find that most of this traffic's already on your network.
Yeah.
I look at the number
Skype.
of users that are using Skype. We've managed to migrate a lot of users away from Skype. You know, they were literally using Skype as an instant messaging platform between university buildings.
Yeah.
We've given them a corporate directory now. They've stopped using that. So they're still using it for external at the minute, but I think you'll probably find that a lot of the traffic's already on your network through bring your own application rather than bring your own device.
Or both.
Or both.
I think we see that as well, because the number of people who use catch-up TV, things like that with video, you know, during lunch breaks and breaks between sessions, it's already there. So probably not too much of a big concern. But picking up on the earlier comment about academics, the new technology is worrying for people of all sorts. It's not just academics. I think you've got to handle people in general, no matter what their role is, individually, and accept that some will use it a lot and some won't use it at all.
Yeah.
And it kind of will probably balance itself out.
Right. Okay. That was slightly shorter than we hoped it was going to be, but it seemed to have been quite useful. So I think we'll try and. Sorry, just one very quick question because people are starving to death.
Traditionally, we have multiple service providers providing connectivity to the university, and as we move moving more towards SIP, I've been asked to investigate what is the recommended approach to have second suppliers still in place, or the SIP is still can rely on one supplier for all of the systems.
My immediate answer to that is based on recent experience. You probably need to have more than one supplier of SIP connectivity, or no big yellow diggers.
Likewise, I think there's a lot of places that will, you know, say we'll sell you a SIP service and an ISDN service. We had single supplier ISDN. We thought we had diverse routes. The ISDN supplier had a major failure of their regional switching node that took everything out. That's led us to say 2 suppliers. That does mean you're in the realms of diverts if your default inbound supplier goes down, which isn't entirely clean, but at least it's a method.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be in the situation again where a regional node goes down, and it was a blooming long outage as well. We're mixing it up, so our default inbound route is ISDN with a failover to SIP. Our default outbound route is SIP with a vice versa failover. Different suppliers for both.
I'm guessing that you can procure those sort of technologies and from a resilience from a technology and a physical point of view through the JPTS as well.
You certainly can, Mark, yes.
You want commission?
And other areas.
There are other purchasing services out there.
Suppliers don't necessarily fix that if they're all going with
Oh, well, absolutely.
Correct.
Right,
if they're both a BT WLR service, then you're not going to necessarily.
Right, I'm a bit conscious of time. Obviously, if people want to carry on having this conversation over lunch, then please do so. We're now going to break for lunch, but we'll try and stick to programme. So if we can be back in here for 2:15, please, I'll be very grateful. Thank you to the guys on stage for taking